Oi, pessoal, tudo bem? Eu sou Adriano Fromer, fundador da Quantum Academy, e hoje eu estou aqui para entrevistar nossa queridíssima professora Sunita Bogle, também conhecida por Sunita Patani. A Sunita Bogle é professora da Quantum Academy, psicoterapeuta especializada em terapias energéticas, mas ela vai falar bastante disso, bastante a respeito disso durante o nosso bate-papo. Hello, Sunita. How are you?
I'm good, Adriano.
Good.
You?
Excellent. So, Sunita, tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, how did you get to become a psychotherapist and even an energy psychotherapist healer, or that's it? So,
So
please.
I didn't actually start off in this field. I originally actually qualified as a teacher. So my background is actually in maths and science, and I taught for a few years. And then I actually stumbled upon this career by accident. Actually, I had a bit of what you'd call a dark night of the soul. Got a really bad eating disorder. At the same time, I developed an interest in spirituality, transpersonal psychology, and I guess I just really went on like a healing journey to really work with my eating disorder. And through that, I kind of found a passion for, I guess, this sort of work. But you know, originally, Adriano, when I enrolled on my psychotherapeutic training, I think there was a big part of me that was actually wanting to go and, you know, heal and
Heal
work with
yourself,
myself. So that's what I did. And, you know, I started clinic and it was fine. You know, it had a spiritual angle to it. And then, of course, there was one day when I had a client who I couldn't help because I wasn't skilled enough. Long story short, she had a breakdown. I couldn't help her. She told me that, you know, if I learned a little bit more about the energy world, that I'd be better at what I did.
The clients told you
The
that.
client
Okay.
told me this, and of course, massive ego hit. But actually, she was right. So at the time, and this was quite a few years ago now, I just remembered hearing about like something called EFT, emotional freedom techniques. I got myself on a course, and well, the rest is history, really. So yeah.
So you just mentioned that you were trained in psychotherapy, talk therapy, regular psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Okay, and as I understand, you are saying that the regular psychotherapy was not working, and then you venture into the world of energy therapy.
So
So can you tell us what's different? What is energy therapy? What kind of energy? What are we talking about here?
So, okay, the first thing I'll say is it's not that I think that talk therapy doesn't work. So I'm a big believer in that there are different therapies that I think are relevant for different people at different times, right? So it's not that talk therapy doesn't work, but what I've come to learn, you know, over the 10, I don't know, 13, 14, however long it's been, you know, years that I've been doing this, is that, you know, there are different types of therapies that work with different parts of you. Okay, so, you know, we have, for example, a mental body, you know, we have a realm of thought, we have emotions that we work with, we have physical feelings in the body that we work with. You know, and then there are, of course, experiences that we have that get, you know, kind of stored in the body. So what energy psychology is, the energy therapies, the ones that I'm trained in anyway, emotional freedom techniques and matrix re-imprinting, they work directly with the energy that you're holding that are related to painful experiences, right? So if you've had, let's say you've experienced some kind of a trauma, that memory still stays within you, and that memory has a charge, like an emotional charge to it. And so these techniques, you know, tapping or matrix re-imprinting, when you use them, they literally move that energy, shift the energy through the body, and they help you to process the negative experience that you've had. The thing with the talk therapy is, I'm not saying it's not useful, there's a space for it, but what often happens is that sometimes when we talk about the same thing over and over, you know, we're not actually shifting the energy. So we might get things off our chest and then the feeling comes back again. And then, of course, there are like clinical cases like anxiety, for example. You know, very visceral feeling, you have very kind of physical feelings going on in the stomach or the chest or wherever. And talking sometimes just doesn't cut it. And this is where emotional freedom techniques, EFT or matrix re-imprinting, can be really effective to shift the energy through.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about EFT or emotional freedom techniques. What is it? How does it work?
So emotional freedom techniques is also known as EFT. It is a form of energy psychology, and it basically involves tapping on certain parts of the body, right? And what happens is when you're tapping, you're basically tapping on the end meridian points, which the theory is that it sends kinetic energy into the body, it clears the blockages, and it helps to release the negative emotion. That's the theory on what this is based on. So emotional freedom techniques based on ancient Chinese and Shaolin principles, 5,000 years old, and it's kind of been refined, as the years have gone on. And it was Gary Craig, I think in the 90s, that actually developed the modern form of what we call emotional freedom techniques today. So it's, in short, it's a process. Also, we also sometimes refer to it as acupuncture without the needles, right? So it's basically, in a nutshell, a system of tap-in on certain parts of the body that will basically send some energy into the body and clear the negative emotions.
Excellent. So, what can EFT, what is it for? Does it heal specific kinds of conditions, diseases, or it can be used in a more broad and general circumstances?
So that's a great question, actually, and I would say both. Okay. I think a lot of it depends on your understanding of emotional freedom techniques and whether you're actually trained in it or whether you have the expertise with it. Because what I see happening is that I see a lot of EFT online and I see a lot of people using it in a very general way. But the truth of the matter is that I think when you're trained properly and you understand the different techniques within emotional freedom techniques, you begin to recognize that it's a very powerful technique, and if used properly, will work with almost any ailment. Like, try it. Physical diseases, emotional, mental health issues. My answer to somebody is always try it, and we have been surprised. I mean, it's worked with anxieties, it's worked with depressions, it's worked with pain. Pain is an interesting one because sometimes we think, pain is just something that's physical in the body. And yet what we find when I do training, maybe 60, 70% of the time, we start focusing on the pain and we use a particular protocol with the tapping. And what we find is that memories start to emerge that are linked to why the pain is there. Clear the emotional charge of the memory and the pain starts to get better. So literally, you can use it with anything, but there is definitely, in my opinion anyway, there's value in learning how to use it properly. And it's an art that you build. And when you get good at it, you recognize how nuanced it actually is, that it requires skill, I think, to be able to maneuver the EFT where you want it to go.
Yeah, can you clarify for me? Because as I've learned, people learn, the sequence of tapping of EFT it's just one, right? You do just one, but you are saying it's a lot of different techniques, it's an art. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're right. The actual sequence itself, it's a two-part sequence, and it will take me less than 10 minutes to teach you how to do it, which but it is such a nuanced approach. So for example, when I train this, right, there are 6 different techniques that I will train within the training. So learning the actual tapping is the easy bit. Learning how to apply that tapping to clear memories, to clear, the ailments that we're talking about, learning, what to do if you think it's not working, learning where to go with it, where to maneuver a client with it. These are all skills that you need to learn and refine and practice.
Okay.
I mean, Adriano, that I've been doing this for years and I'm still learning. When we train it, right, I'm still constantly surprised as that we can adapt it like that. And, so I think the practice evolves, but the more that you're committed to building the art and understanding exactly how it works with memories and where to take it, it will refine as you move along. And, it will become your own.
As anything you do in life, you have to
refine it.
It doesn't come easily. You have to refine it. Perfect. You mentioned before, you are trained in EFT or you were training in energy psychology, specific EFT and matrix reimprinting. So tell us, what is matrix reimprinting and what is it for?
Okay, so matrix reimprinting is developed by Carl Dawson, who actually trained me in EFT. And matrix reimprinting is a beautiful technique that uses a combination of tapping, visualization, reframing, working with your, well, we call them echoes, but you know, your inner children, let's say. So it's a very, very beautiful process that brings a lot of these, you know, these modalities kind of together. And the whole point of Matrix is it literally rewires your perception regarding a particular memory. So Matrix is used specifically to actually shift a belief. So with EFT, what I tend to say, Adriano, is that EFT is, you know, let's say if you've got a painful memory, you tune into it and suddenly you can feel it in your body as if you're there again. So EFT will shift that negative energy through the body and get rid of it, okay? Now, with Matrix is slightly different. So Matrix actually works with those parts of you, you know, we call them echoes, like the parts of you where you've frozen in your psyche. And we use tapping within that. But what we do is we take it a little bit further and we actually begin to change the belief. So with EFT, we don't change the belief per se. We remove the negative energy and then we decide, okay, who do we want to be now and how are we going to form a new belief? So it's not, I mean, you do form a new belief, but not as targeted, not in the same targeted way as you would with Matrix. Whereas with Matrix, you're actually going in, okay, what was the old belief and what is the new belief? And you actually work to reprogram the new belief in. The other thing which I think is super important to recognize about Matrix is that a lot of people quite often think that, oh, you know, EFT is a really great tool, but Sunita, I'm a bit dissociated, I can't feel. Matrix is phenomenal because it allows you to actually work with the memory, even though you can't feel it. You can remember
when
it.
You say feel in the body.
Feel it in the body, yeah. So you might not have any visceral feelings that are coming up. You know it's there. You know it's affected you, but you just can't feel it because, you know, for whatever reason, it may be unsafe to go there. Matrix will allow you to go there in a very gentle way and turn the belief around without necessarily feeling it in the body.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Great. So, some time ago, I was like looking, Instagram was impacting me with a lot of content about EFT. And I remember I saw a young boy tapping in his point and saying, I deserve, I'm a good person, I can be loved, I am good. So does it work this way? I mean, is it useful to like say good things about myself, tapping the points and...
Okay. So, it might do temporarily.
Okay.
Does it work to shift the negative stuff? Okay, so here's the thing. You mentioned it was a boy. Was it a child?
Yeah, teenager.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a bad technique to work for a youngster. It might kind of make them feel more positive. It might kind of shift their vibe in the moment, right? So there is a space for positive tapping, but it's nuanced. There's a space for it. But if you're asking me whether it's, you know, how would it work long term? My question would be, interesting, if he's tapping on, I deserve this, or right, my question would be, what experiences have you had in the past that have made you feel like you don't deserve. Okay. So where I would go with this is that I would begin to explore with the client that, okay, let's have a look at where the root of this has come from. Why don't you deserve? And I would look at it the other way and focus on the shadow part, the negativity, the memories that have actually caused that belief to come up. Because when that is clear, and then you angle the positive tapping, you are going to clear the belief, work on clearing the belief, and then you're going to work to reprogram. My personal experience with EFT has been that if you just go in and you just use the positive stuff, you're not actually necessarily dealing with the actual root problem. How did it get there? What's the belief? So there's a chance that you're going to bypass it altogether. But, Adriano, having said that, every client is very different. Every person processes very differently. And will there be a person where that particular technique actually works for all the way? Yeah, maybe. There may well be, okay? But my general consensus is that my experience of working with you has been, you need to go a little bit deeper and work with the actual belief and how it's formed.
Perfect. So let's talk about trauma. Okay, so I know, because I know your work, that both EFT and matrix reimprinting are very, very efficient to deal with trauma, to heal trauma or treat whatever word you say, but to work on traumas. So before we say how it works, can you explain to us what is a trauma? How does it work in us? I mean, and how those techniques can be very useful to deal with traumas.
Okay, so that's quite a big question, and there's actually quite a lot of literature, or there's quite a big explanation to that particular answer. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a very simplified version. Okay, so the way that we kind of define a trauma is when we experience something that's unexpected, something that's dramatic, something that's isolating, and something with which we have no experience to deal. Okay. So, one of the kind of arguments in the literature quite often has been, well, is it the incident that's traumatic, or is it the perception that's formed that's traumatic? And I kind of tend to say, well, yeah, I mean, there are going to be some things that may happen, like if there's an earthquake or something like that, that's likely to be traumatic for many people because it's going to threaten their life, right? So there's going to be an element of, God, that could really be a traumatic experience. But actually, whether or not we internalize that as a traumatic experience comes down to the perception that we form about the experience. And this differs from person to person. So you could have two people that have experienced the same, let's say, traumatic incident, and one person ends up, suffering with the traumatic symptoms and the other person doesn't. And why does that happen? There are a range of different reasons, right down from your previous trauma history to your different personality type, to whether you've got like a secure network in place that you go home to. So there are many different factors that might actually influence that, okay? But yeah, the main thing is the perception, the belief that you form at the moment of the shock, and even like just before or the after effects, and really looking at the perceptions and the beliefs that are formed, and then using the EFT with the energy that's kind of stored there and trapped there, or the matrix, to remove.
So you talk about like the trauma the person lived, okay, you experienced the trauma, but is there such a thing as generational trauma? I mean, a trauma that I inherit from my mother or from even someone in my generation I don't even know?
Yeah, there is, and there's actually, I would say, some body of evidence of work done around this. I know that there's been research done, for example, in, if I remember correctly, children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors are more likely to suffer with depressive symptoms, for example, right? So yes, there is a chance that, like, and if you just think about it, Adriano, when we experience these things, they stay with us in the body, they impact our cells, has an impact on our DNA most likely. And then like we procreate, we make children. And so, yeah, there's going to be some, I would imagine, memory that, that kind of moves down the generations. But yes, and then, you have things like the EFT, the matrix, constellations that work with this generational trauma. I mean, one of the things I know that I've seen several times actually over in clinic has been when we look at the onset of binge eating, for example, and, and diet culture and how diet culture mimics restriction. And I remember coming across somebody whose grandparent, I think, had been in a war and had experienced starvation. And as a result of that, when the war had finished, the grandparent had then obviously, because they were no longer restricted, eating a lot and gained a lot of weight. And it was interesting, 2 generations down, you're seeing like the grandchild kind of living out something similar. There was something about, starting to diet, triggering the restriction that her grandparent may have experienced, and then obviously getting into the loop of having issues around weight and stuff. So, yes, it does exist. And again, EFT and Matrix, brilliant tools to actually begin to work with this.
Okay, still on trauma. Okay, so we talk about generational trauma, but okay, some people believe, or the quantum worldview, which is the base for Quantum Academy, the ground for Quantum Academy knowledge, consider like reincarnation, past lives as a possible, very possible thing to happen. So is there such a thing, if you consider reincarnation is there such a thing as a past life trauma?
So is it true? Does it exist? Or is it the mind kind of presenting you with images that we are kind of calling, you know, past life experiences? I don't know. But what I know is that if it presents in clinic, if it presents as a case, I kind of work with it and, you know, bring it to full circle in healing. And yeah.
So you're saying like it's important that what it means to the person, if it's true or not true, it doesn't matter for the healing process. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what's important is the meaning that the client gives it. That's the most important thing. Whether or not you think that you believe in past lives or you don't, or you need to believe in past lives for this to work, I don't think that's relevant. I think the most relevant thing is, let's work with whatever's there, whatever you think it is, let's bring it full circle and let's resolve the trauma.
So can a trauma impact my physical health? I mean, I have a trauma, but then this trauma develop as a physical disease or a physical pain. Is that possible?
My clinical experience would suggest, yeah, that my personal experience would say yes, because, you know what, Adriano, we've had numerous cases like this actually, but, you know, one that kind of stands out to me was we had, I don't know if you remember, there was a man that came on the course and he came in and I think he had a frozen shoulder or something, and he couldn't lift his arm like past 20%. And when we started kind of doing the energy work and tapping on it, you know, a memory surfaced, which was something to do with, I think, his mum and a near-death experience. I can't quite remember now. And I think it was a 45-minute session, if you remember we did. And by the end of that 45-minute session, he was 80% better and he left the course actually being able to lift his arm. So I would say that, yeah, you know, our emotional experiences do have an impact on our physical body. I don't think emotions and physical body are, you know, I think we're deeply interconnected. Your thoughts, your emotions, your physical body, they're not isolated pieces of you. They're deeply interconnected parts of who you are. So, yeah.
Okay. In your work, because when we say trauma, at least is my perception of the word trauma, is that it's a big thing. I mean, trauma, if I think about trauma, I think like rape, earthquake or terrorism. But I know you mentioned that there's not all the traumas we live. There's the big T trauma and the small T trauma. Can you elaborate that a bit?
Yeah, so with me, the way that I like to work, the school of thought that I resonate with is that, you know, you can have a big T trauma, which is what would be life-threatening. And then you can have small T traumas, which are like the everyday things that kind of happen. If you remember, I kind of gave the definition a while ago about, you know, trauma is something that's unexpected, something that's dramatic, something that's isolating, something that with which you have no strategy to heal. Now, the thing is, you could experience something quite small and insignificant to somebody else, but for you, that thing hits hard and you kind of internally froze at that point. So, you know, I would call that a small traumatic event. So for me personally, that's how I like to view it. But again, I think, you know, different people define things in different ways, but that's how I like to kind of look at it.
So how can we break a generational trauma circle?
You know, I think it's most important to recognize when we're working with generational trauma, you know, you're working with a client that's sitting in front of you who has a particular issue, okay? Personally speaking, my first point of call isn't necessarily about looking at the generational element. My first port of call is actually looking at, okay, so what's the issue? Let's just have a look at that as an issue. And then let's have a look at, you know, how we're actually going to clear this. Now, the thing is, you know, when the client clears it, the client is actually stopping the loop from moving forward to the future generations. However, having said that, matrix reimprinting is a tool that actually allows us to work across the different generations to actually clear the backlog of it, to make sure that there's no like energy from the past kind of, pulling in any way. So yeah, that's probably how I would, well, not probably, that's how I have done it. Yeah, how I work with it.
So you wrote a couple of books, okay, and one of them, it's called The Transcendent Mind, but we translate it in Brazil as The Power of the Mind. Okay, so tell me a little bit what is this book about?
So the Transcendent Mind was actually the result of my fascination. It was in the earlier years, actually, as a therapist. My fascination of, this idea that we're all kind of unified and we're all kind of interconnected. This idea that technically we're all one, but we're individual manifestations of like one source. So the Transcendent Mind is really an exploration, at least a good first half of the book, looking at the evidence from a multidisciplinary perspective of, is it actually true? Could we be, one individual manifestations of one source? And if that is the case, what implication does that then have on our healing? Like, what is the relevance of forgiveness, or what is the relevance of like kindness and empathy? So the Transcendent Mind primarily, it looks at lots of different avenues, like, and also lots of different studies from lots of different areas that seem to point towards the idea that there is one transcendent mind. And, and then most importantly, how we begin to use that knowledge in order to begin our healing journey.
Okay, so let's get into a bit of a personal realm, okay? So people know a little bit about you, not only about your theories, okay? Or your practice. So tell me a book.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Or Matilda. I used to love Matilda.
Cool.
Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Ah.
I love these sorts of books. This is why I love Matrix, because there's something magical about them. But anyway.
And a movie.
Harry Potter, definitely.
All of them? Or there's a Harry Potter favorite one?
No, I like all of them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And a song?
In With the In Crowd, Gregory Porter.
Why?
Because I used to be a loner and now I'm not.
Okay,
So
cool.
I like the song.
Favorite place in the world?
Rio.
Rio de Janeiro?
Yeah.
Brazil?
Yeah. Yeah. Love the vibe.
Really? Cool. Favorite food?
I think it would have to be Indian, actually.
India? Any
Yeah.
specific Indian food?
Any specific Indian food? You know what? I quite like something called Pani Puri or Golgappa. Do you know what that is? Have you ever
No.
tried it? So it's like these little, you've never tried one? We've never given you one?
I might have. I don't know by the name. Yeah.
They're like these little, God, I don't even know how to describe it. They're like these little crispy little ball things that you crack open and you fill and then like you put, It's a real fun food to have. You've got to try it.
Okay. And like a word or a sentence that you use or that you like.
Give it a go. What's the worst that's going to happen?
Excellent. And finally, is there anything, any message anything you like to say to other therapists, practitioners, to improve their awareness of the practice of energy psychology?
You know what? If you don't have EFT, matrix, or any energy psychology practice in your toolbox, you're missing out, really. I mean, from my personal experience, Adriano, for me, the EFT and the matrix revolutionized the way that I work, like literally revolutionized it. So if you're a therapist or a practitioner and you haven't yet explored that world, please think about exploring it, because there's such powerful tools. And when you learn how to use them, the amount of service that we're able to do and the help we're able to provide really does increase kind of tenfold. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
É isso, pessoal. Até.